this full screen and then minimize that. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the first fully charged Q&A session on Discord. We've got our first guest today, which is DJ Hybrid. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate.
Big ups for coming down, I guess, on this. Definitely a new sort of platform for everyone.
Yeah.
How have you been keeping through lockdown then?
Busy really. Just been working on my new album, doing a lot of label bits, and just a lot of things like sample packs and lost tapes and all that. So yeah, I've been really busy, to be honest.
Sweet. That album, are you able to tell us any more sort of exclusive information on that? Or it's 3 years in the making, so...
It is, yeah. It's over 3 years now in the making. Yeah, it's coming out this year on Lined Up International, and yeah, I think it should hopefully come out in the summer, and we're going to be releasing a load of singles leading up to that. But yeah, at the moment it's looking like it's going to be a good sort of 20 tracks at least. So yeah, it's going to be quite a big project, to be honest.
Sweet. Is it sort of full spectrum of drum and bass, mainly jungle? What should we be expecting from that?
Yeah, I'd say it is pretty much a full spectrum. I think it started out as more of a jungle album, but I think over the years I've been working on it, it probably does just feature a bit of everything now. There's a lot of there's a lot of different vocal tracks on there, but then there's a few more liquid tunes, and then there's a few of bigger dance floor tunes. So yeah, I'd say it just features all different styles, but in with my kind of take on those styles.
Sounds good. So I think how this sort of session is going to be running is nearly spilled my tea. I've put a question out on Instagram and gathered sort of 15 questions. Well, we had so many questions come through, but we sort of narrowed them down to sort of similarities of what we got and some unique ones and interesting ones I think we would want to know. And then I think we'll go through those questions. If anyone wants to add anything more to that question, they can. And if anyone's got any separate questions, they can just unmute. For the people who have just joined, you should just be able to unmute your microphone and you'll be able to speak. And then if you just mute it again after, to avoid any background noise. So I think to start with, what got you into sort of DJing? What was sort of your first steps into the DJ world?
So when I was about sort of 17 or 18, I was really into before I was into sort of drum and bass and raving, I was really into hip hop and electronica and stuff like that. And originally, when I first bought turntables when I was 18, originally I was going to be a turntablist, a hip hop scratch DJ, and that was pretty much my thing at that point. But then when I sort of got to the age of 18 and started going out to raves and stuff like that, started listening to more drum and bass, and then started buying drum and bass vinyl, and then I didn't really look back after that, and it's just been doing that ever since.
So what were sort of your influences of music back then? You wanted to be a hip hop.
Pre-drum and bass?
Yeah.
So I used to be a really big fan of anything on Ninja Tune or Big Dada, like Roots Maneuver, or Cold Cut, Mr. Scruff, DJ Vadim. And then I was really into old school hip hop as well. Just any East Coast, Eric B and Rakim, all that kind of old school original hip hop as well.
Okay, and then coming into sort of the rave scene, then what were sort of your influences that sort of swerved you towards drum and bass then?
I think at first, I was very much into. I mean, at the time, I suppose it was about sort of 2004. 2004, 2005. I think when I first started mixing drum and bass, and I think a lot of my influences at the time were DJ Zinc or Aphrodite. Or I used to really, I think when I very first started listening to drum and bass, I started listening to High Contrast and Hospital Records and stuff like that. And then I kind of got more into sort of like Jump Up and like Ganja Records and like like Generation Dub and Hazard and stuff like that.
Sweet. So before setting up a record label, how long were you DJing for, and then what point of your sort of career did you want to start setting up a label?
I think I'd been DJing for a good few years, and I think it was just getting to the point where I was trying to sort of get more gigs, like around my hometown of Coventry, where I grew up, and around the Midlands, like the Birmingham area. And I think me and my mate, we were just finding that, like, it was really hard to get DJ bookings places if you were just a DJ. So we kind of realised, like, quite early on that, we were going to have to learn how to produce and be producers, basically. And I think, we started learning how to produce, and I think, we were at a point where we wanted to get our music, out there, but we didn't really know any labels or anything like that. So we just thought that we'd start our own label. So originally, the entire reason we started Audio Addict was purely to just release our own music. That was it at first.
Did you have any experience in running any sort of record label, or did you both go in sort of blind and learn as you go?
Yeah, I had no experience whatsoever. I think my mate who I started the label with, Chris, he was at uni, and he was doing like music production, music business at uni. So he had a little bit of knowledge, but yeah, I'd say predominantly it was pretty much all just like hard work and persistence, really, and just teaching ourselves.
So you say you set up a record label to get your music out there. When you wanted to find other artists, what would you look for in said artists to like sign them on or whatever?
I think at first we were just looking for Audio Addict to be like a very versatile label. So we were just looking for all different types of music to release back then. We wanted to release like not just drum and bass. We were going to really this is when dubstep was quite big, so we were going to release like drum and bass and dubstep and hip hop and stuff like that. But I think the way it kind of worked out is that we knew more kind of drum and bass producers, and that's the stuff that we got sent at first. But I think at first we were just looking to kind of get started any way that we could, really. So I think we got sent quite a few tunes from quite a few people, and some of them weren't so great, but I think we ended up, the first sort of load of tunes we ended up signing were probably more sort of like liquid, more kind of deeper tunes, really.
And then, so you're signing like liquid tunes. Obviously, you're sort of more jungle tunes. Were you always into like jungle tunes, or did your like interest sort of change as your career came on?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think when I very first started out mixing and listening to drum and bass, I was, like I said, I was really into Liquid and Hospital Records, and then I went through like a bit of a jump up phase, like when I first started going to raves and that. So originally, when I first started producing, I was actually like, this is going back sort of like 14, 15 years ago, but I was trying to make like more sort of jump up, or what the sound of jump up was at that time, or I was trying to make more kind of bigger sounding dance floor stuff, like Sub Focus, like Drum Sound, Bassline Smith. It probably wasn't until a couple of years of trying to make that style and probably not doing a very good job of it that I then started to kind of get, probably go back more to the sort of original jungle sound and working with breaks and stuff. And I just found that it was a lot more, I enjoyed making that style more, and it was more fun. And that's when I sort of kind of went sort of down the jungle route, really.
Okay. So when looking for tracks then, and say you've got, as a label owner, and you're having loads of tracks submitted to you, what makes a track stand out for you? And when like listening to a track, how would you split a sort of a basic track to a track which is going to go well?
I think the main thing is it's got to at least be something well, it's got to be well produced, for one.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you can get like a really good idea, but unless it's got a good mix down and that, then sometimes they're not always very well received. But I think the main thing is it's got to be somewhat well produced, but it's also, I think, I mean, I use a lot of samples, and I've always used a lot of sample packs and stuff, obviously making jungle. But I think there's sometimes where like people do send tunes, and that you can sort of tell, almost like recognise where some of the samples have come from. So I think that's it. The only thing I'd say is if you're going to use samples, at least try and make it so that people can't recognise, what sample pack you've used, basically. But yeah, I suppose it's got to be, well produced and original, to an extent, and obviously, it is a business as well. So you've got to see it selling as well, and you've got to see that, you've got to think that the track's going to be well received.
And then staying on that topic, for like up and coming producers, what sort of tips and advice would you give them for sort of producing their music and then helping them get their music recognised by bigger labels?
I think again, you've got to sort of find your own sound. I think sometimes it's a bit cliche, like a lot of people say that, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely got to be something about you which stands out, amongst everyone else. I think in regards to sort of sending tunes to big labels, like you said, they probably are only looking to take on sort of original sounding tunes anyway. So yeah, I think just probably stuff that people have already said a million times before, but just kind of do your own thing in it, and don't try and just see what comes naturally. Don't sit down and be like, right, I need to make this exact type of tune. Just see what, because whenever I go into the studio with a specific plan, I never end up coming out with that anyway. It always ends up being a totally different idea. So I suppose just let things flow naturally, and don't be scared to do something different from everyone else.
So, and then when you are producing your music, what type of so you're coming up with a new track, what elements of the track do you focus on first, and what's sort of like your creative way into developing that track?
I think it depends what kind of tune. But say if I was making a jungle tune, then I definitely always start with the breaks, and I'll probably spend a little bit of time.
Actually, do you want to share nuggets?
Brushing up to jungle breaks and that.
Share 20.
Hang on.
What now? you ordering now?
Dang.
They're finishing? No.
I can't mute it. Dang. Yeah. Sorry about that.
So yeah, like I'd with a jungle tune, I'd definitely start with like mashing up jungle breaks and stuff like that. And then I'd probably then start working some samples in and working on the bass line and stuff like that. If I was working on a more melodic kind of liquid tune or something with a lot of musical elements, then I might just start with the intro, like the pads and the what chords and stuff, and I might then over time get to the drums and the drop section. So it totally depends on the tune, but I'd say 9 times out of 10 I'll probably start with the drums first.
And do you have some sort of like creative, what am I trying to say, like when coming into making a track, do you have like a rough idea in your head of how you want the track to end, or is it just sort of put something down halfway through the creation of it, you go on to a completely different tangent, and then the finishing product is completely different from the start?
Yeah, I think, as I said, if I go into the studio with a specific idea, it very rarely ends up sounding like that. And I think there's even times where I have gone into the studio with a specific idea, and it's felt a bit too forced, and things haven't come as naturally. And I think I've always made probably the best tunes when I've literally just gone into the studio with no idea and just sat down and, like I said, just seen what comes naturally, really.
And then, how long do you like to spend, sort of, in a studio session? How long would you like to spend on one track before you want to get it wrapped up or finished, or move on to a new track?
I think I probably, the first kind of session that I do, I'd probably spend at least about 4 to 6 hours doing the creative part. I like to basically do it. I lay all the creative stuff down in one session, and it almost like a rough draft, if you like. I'll just get all of the creative bits down, while I'm enthusiastic about what I'm working on, and then I might leave it, for however long, like a week, 2 weeks, a month, or whatever, and then I'll come back in, and then I'll have a session of like engineering it, and just tweaking things, mixing stuff down. And then I might leave it again for an amount of time, and then I might then come back and master it. But the one thing I did find when I first started was I'd spend so long working on one tune, and it would take me that long to actually finish it. I wasn't really getting anywhere. So one thing that I would say is you just always make sure that keep your work rate up. There's no point agonising over one tune for 2 months. It's better to just. I always try and start something fresh every week. Whether I finish it or not, but just so you've got that regularity of just starting with a blank page and just kind of and being creative, really, more than anything.
Have you got any advice for like keeping a good workflow and work rate throughout, say, the week? Like keeping motivated, what you do to keep the creativity going throughout the week?
Yeah, just like I say, just don't get too bogged down, like you say, agonising over one tune. You've always just got to keep working on new stuff. It's like if you spend too long on one tune, you're probably going to overcook it anyway, and then you're not going to like how it sounds. So I'd always say just keep them coming. Just start as many new ideas as possible. And I try and start like a new tune every Monday. Do you know what I mean? So that's my way of keeping my workflow going.
And then, because we've got quite a few beginner producers and up-and-coming producers here, what type of tips and advice would you give them for like breaking through the scene, or even before that? Like, what type of advice would you give them that you would learn and wish you knew when you were starting?
I think probably the best thing you could say to people is just don't rush it. I'm guilty of it myself. Like as I said earlier, I started a label just in order to release my music on vinyl, and I probably wasn't even ready to release my music. But I was just enthusiastic and just wanted to get stuff out there. But yeah, I think a lot of the younger people coming through, or people that are just starting out at the moment, there's some really good young producers coming through at the moment that have only been doing it like a year or so on, but still, just learn your craft and just figure out exactly what it is you want to do before you get carried away, because I think it's quite easy these days. Like I say, there's a lot of pressure to, like you say, get your tunes signed and get your tunes out there. But the problem is if you release too much stuff when at an early stage, you might then 5 years later, if them tunes have been released, they're always going to be attached to your name then. Like I've certainly released tunes, in the past, in the early parts of my career, which I kind of wish that I hadn't, because I wasn't quite ready yet, So yeah, just wait until you're ready, and don't feel pressured to just get your music out there for the sake of
it. You mentioned there's up and comers killing it at the moment. Who are you feeling at the moment that have only been producing for a short amount of time?
There's quite a few, to be honest. I'd say like in the last sort of like 2 years or so, I've probably witnessed like the biggest kind of influx in new talent that I've seen since I've been doing it. But yeah, off the top of my head, there's like Burnsy from New Zealand, like he's killing it. Brock as well, I really like his stuff. Zav, J Select, Toby Ross, Napes, Lupo, Refractor. I could go on. There's so many.
So, who out of in your career, who's been your favourite person to sort of collab with, produce with, work with?
Probably, I think the people that have probably helped me most is probably like either like Blade Runner or Ares. I'd say like, I mean, I've done like a studio session with them in the past where like Dev like came down to my studio and I went up to Bristol to Ares studio, and obviously we make kind of similar sounding stuff anyway. So obviously I've always looked up to them. So yeah, I just found it really beneficial getting in the studio with them guys and learning how they do things, you know.
And then who would be your sort of dream person to collab with, work with?
I mean, it was Blade Runner until he came to my studio. I think I'd say probably someone like Dillinger, to be honest.
So saying you've learned from people sort of higher up from you, what sort of tips would you give to producers on their mix downs and masters? It's a common question you've been asked.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I always say, like, you know, mix downs, still to this day, you know, I still struggle with mix downs. You know, I don't think you ever get to that point where you're just like, right, you know, I know everything about mixing down or whatever. I think, you know, even now with, obviously I'm trying to finish off my album and I'm working on the mix downs and stuff like that. Probably the best thing you can do when you're mixing stuff down is get a second pair of ears. You know, send stuff to choose a few people that you kind of trust their judgment, and send stuff to them and just get their feedback and take the feedback constructively as well. You know, I'll send bits from my album to a few people that I trust. You know, they'll give me a bit of feedback, and then I go back in and make these little adjustments. You know, but yeah, I'd just say get a second opinion. And just try not to spend too much time because it's really easy to overwork a mix down. You know, you get like almost like lost down a rabbit hole of like tweaking things when, you know, the reality is it's better to kind of to go in and make these concise little alterations and then leave it again. Do you know what I mean? And then come back to it and then, you know, listen to it again with fresh ears and then again make these little concise alterations rather than, you know, if you spend like 3 hours mixing down a tune, then you're probably just going to overwork it. And there's been plenty of times where I've spent ages mixing down tunes. I've got up to like mix number 16 or 17 or whatever. And then I've listened to the first mix that I started with and then realised I actually preferred the first mix in the first place and literally gone back to the first mix, you know.
Another question we've had is: have you got any tips for getting tracks to sound wider?
Yeah. I mean, reverb, stereo width. I mean, I think if it's wideness that you're looking for, then you need to know a lot about the stereo field and exactly where certain elements resonate best in the stereo field. You know.
Cool. Someone else has just asked, what is your favourite drum break?
What is it? I mean, I think the Think break has always been a favourite of mine. You know, just because it's obviously I've used it in enough tunes, but I've always been a big fan of the Funky Drummer break as well because I'm a big James Brown fan.
Going back to sort of your label and running your label, when bringing people into the admin side, for example, like A&R, what qualities do you look for?
I mean, it definitely helps if the artist already has, you know, a bit of a following or a social media presence of some sort, you know, because obviously, you know, me as the label, you know, I will try and promote an artist to the best of my ability. But if they have no following themselves, then it can be quite hard to, you know, to get a new artist, especially to get a new artist over to people. But if someone already has a good following, you know, like say a good social media presence, then you can kind of combine forces on it then, and it makes everyone's job a lot easier.
And then when setting up your label, what advice would you give to sort of fresh labels or people wanting to start up a label?
Um, I think the thing is now when I started my first label, Audio Addict in 2010, it was like there was quite a few people that were starting labels, but it was still in kind of in the days of vinyl, or sort of the last kind of days of when vinyl was prominent in the stores and that. So I think there wasn't as many people starting labels back then, but obviously now it's like pretty much everyone has a label. Like anyone can start a label nowadays, which is there's good points and bad points about that. The good point is anyone can have an opportunity to start a label now, whether they you don't have to have like $2,000 to get a load of vinyls pressed and stuff like that. You can just obviously release it digitally. But I think what labels really need to do these days, because I had to do it when I started a label. I wasn't in the position to start a label and go, right, I want this artist, and this artist, because they were the people that I liked were already signed to other labels, and I was just starting out, so I had to find people. I had to scour SoundCloud, finding unsigned artists to start my label with, really. Or at least artists that were relatively unheard of, and some of them have now gone on to do quite well for themselves. But I think one thing that I do notice about labels these days is, rather than sort of finding their own sort of unsigned artists, they tend to just look at other labels and say, right, we'll just hit up every single one of their artists and see who gets back to us. So I think new labels, they need to really spend a bit of time and try and don't just find artists that are already established that are on other labels. Look for unsigned artists. Look for new artists that no other label has, so you can be original.
So how did you go about making your label unique, and sort of what draws did you have to bring artists onto your label?
I think at first with Audio Addict, it was very much like I say, I was learning myself, so I think it was very much just I had to just learn as I went. So that it really took a long time to sort of get Audio Addict established and so on. I think with Deep in the Jungle, it was obviously that took off quite quickly, but obviously we were focusing on a very unique, a very, very specific selling point on that, which was just focusing on jungle music and ragga jungle and stuff like that. So I think with the Jungle label, I think as soon as there was obviously there were other jungle labels doing similar stuff at the time, but a lot of them were more kind of like underground, like Bandcamp labels, and maybe labels that might release like 1 or 2 vinyls a year or something like that. I think we had pretty good luck with Deep in the Jungle, because we had a lot of jungle artists that we found on SoundCloud, which were making really good jungle music, but they didn't really have an outlet to release it, or like I said, they were already on a label that like I said only did a couple of releases a year. So I think we were able to take a load of different jungle producers and give them a regular output that they didn't already have.
And then, what type of artists have you had? Did you bring onto Audio Addict, which have now gone on to being successful?
I think Kumarachi is a really good example. When I first started talking to Kumarachi, it was probably about 8 years ago now, or 9 years ago, and I think he'd had a couple of releases, on a few, he'd had a couple of releases here and there, but I don't think he'd released as much, like EPs and stuff. So obviously he's gone on to do really well now. I think another one would be RMS as well, from Canada. When he first started sending me tunes, he could barely mix stuff down, and I was having to help him with his mix downs and stuff like that. Now he's got tunes signed to Ram Records, so that's literally in the space of like about 6 or 7 years that we've been working together.
So when you were sort of releasing regularly on Audio Addict, how did you determine that you were releasing not too much or not too little? Like, what was sort of like the deciding points for release times and stuff?
I mean, it's a tricky one really, because I suppose at the time we were kind of just had to deal with what we were getting sent really. So we certainly we weren't as consistent as we are now, because we might have got sent a couple of releases and scheduled them over a 2 or 3 month period, but then we'd end up with big gaps in our release schedule where we'd have 2-3 months with no releases, and we didn't have any stuff to release in that time. So I think at first the problem was not having enough artists to release. And now, fast forward 10 years, the problem is I've got too many artists to release now. So now I think it's more of a case of me just having to be really organised with the schedule, and just kind of, I suppose the good thing I have is, because I'm a producer myself, I know how I like to be treated by a label if I'm going to work with them. Do you know what I mean? So I try and treat my artists with the same respect of how I would want to be treated by a label, really. And obviously, you wouldn't want to have too many releases, released near to each other that are going to take the focus off. I think we try and do probably one release per label a month, maybe. But at times it does end up being more than that. But yeah, I think as long as you can sort of dedicate the time to these artists, and if you're going to take an artist, if you're going to sign an artist's music and release it, you just really need to make sure that you're going to promote them as an artist to the best of your ability, and do them do their tunes justice as well, because there's nothing worse than getting tunes signed to a label and the label doesn't promote the release, and the release goes completely under the radar. So it's just a case of making sure that everyone's happy, and that you're, like I said, promoting the artist to the best of your ability, really.
So you said now the problem is you're getting too much music. Producers, what advice would you give to producers to make sure they're including in their tunes what's sort of the instant thing, if you hear it's going straight in the delete pile, and what type of things you're looking for goes straight in the further listen pile?
Again, I think a lot does depend on the quality of the tune. I think there's certain circumstances where I might get sent a tune and I really like the idea of it, and maybe the mix down isn't quite up to scratch, and I'll a lot of time I'll work with artists and I'll stem mix their tunes for them, and so on, just if they're not quite there yet with their mix downs. But again, I think that I get sent a lot of tunes that sound similar to other tunes, really, so it's quite easy to overlook them ones. But it's always the ones that just catch you off guard, just something that, not necessarily something you've never heard before, but just something which isn't something that you think you're going to have over another label, just a tune that doesn't sound like every other tune that's getting released at the moment, really.
And then someone's just messaged us now. Could you tell us all about why Audio Addict disbanded?
Disbanded? What do you mean, before we relaunched it?
Yes, I gather so, yeah.
Yeah, so with Audio Addict, like I said, it's my first label, and I started it when I was just starting out myself. And it wasn't, over the years, it wasn't it's been going 10 years now. Well, it'll be 11 years this year in August, in fact. So it's a really long time it's been running. And I think it's really, really hard to keep the momentum of a label up for that long, really. Obviously, you've got labels like Ram and Hospital and so on, but, they also have teams of X amount of people, and obviously have their kind of some of the best artists in the scene. But I think when you're running an even smaller independent label, it's just really hard to keep the momentum going for that long. And I think, inevitably it's probably after about 6 or 7 years, maybe, or 8 years or so. Then I think a few of the artists which I've mentioned earlier, like obviously people like Kumarachi and RMS and people like that, they're obviously moving on to other labels, like Kumarachi's like released on Critical and stuff like that, and RMS has got stuff forthcoming on RAM and a few other big labels. So I think we ended up in a sort of situation where we didn't really have that many artists on the label, and like I said, we still had the kind of the same logo that we had in the beginning. We had all the same kind of logo, everything like that for 7 or 8 years, and I think people do get bored, and I certainly got bored of it myself, and I sort of lost my passion for it a little bit. So yeah, we had a little bit of a dip in releases and so on, and I was in two minds whether to just stop the label altogether, because it's quite hard to, like say, to be enthusiastic about something that you've been doing for so long. But in the end, I decided to go the other way, and I basically rebranded the label, got all new graphic designers, like new logo, all new artists, and this kind of coincides as well with what I said about the biggest influx of new artists that I've seen over the last 2 years. I thought if I'm gonna relaunch the label and rebrand it, before it was very much a label, like I said, that we released all different types of drum and bass and stuff. But when I relaunched it, I really wanted the emphasis to be on new artists, and so I thought, with all these new young artists that are coming through now, it would be a perfect time to rebrand it. And like I said, it was coming up to the anniversary as well, like the 10-year anniversary. So I thought if I could rebrand it, get a load of new artists, and plan a load of releases that coincide with the 10-year thing, it will kind of get the label back off the ground and kind of get a bit of a buzz about the label again. And luckily, that's exactly what it's done.
Perfect. So yeah, I think we'll open the Discord up now to open questions. So if anyone has got any questions, just unmute their mic and you can ask.
I have one. I didn't want to say anything and everyone else speak at the same time. My question is, in such an ever changing market almost, the drum and bass is, with rollers being a new thing, have you ever found it quite hard to adapt to changes in what people are rating whilst keeping your own sort of style involved at the same time?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the main sort of issues that you have when you're trying to sort of have longevity in your brand or yourself as an artist, because you do notice trends and so on change in the scene. I think there was a huge kind of revival of jungle about over the last sort of 5-6 years, and that's why Deep in the Jungle ended up doing really well, because we kind of caught that revival of jungle just as it was happening. Now I notice it's, again, like you say, it's a bit more kind of going down the rollers route now, and the more stripped back kind of elements and stuff like that. I think you've got to, I suppose you do have to move with the times as such, but you don't want to sort of compromise yourself to the point where you're just following trends. So
yeah, definitely.
I suppose it's all about having a good balance of knowing what the market wants, but also being able to put your own original output on the market as well.
Definitely. Thank you.
Right.
I've got another question. What should we be watching out for this year from you? I know you said about your album, but have you got any other sort of bigger career monuments coming out this year?
Yeah, I've got a new thing coming on, Born on Road, as part of a compilation. I think it's coming out soon. I'm not sure on the date, but that's coming out soon. Obviously, there's all the stuff coming out on Lion Dub. And then I'm just, at the moment, obviously I've just been really busy with doing the lost tapes and stuff like that. So I suppose at the moment I'm just in the process of planning the next like VIP lost tapes, basically. So I'm in the process of like sorting out some more remixes for that. So far I've got like a remix from Ti and Sub-Zero. So there'll be more sort of details on that over the next couple of months or so. But yeah, other than that, I'd say probably just like on my Patreon page, really. It's just patreon.com DJ Hybrid, and I upload like new exclusive tunes to that every month, sample packs, and yeah, pretty much anything that's going on. It's always good to keep up to date with it there, or like on my Instagram or whatever.
Wicked.
Okay.
Oh, go on.
No, go on.
No.
Go on.
No. Go. Sorry.
All right. Cool. Yeah, all right, Hybrid. You good, mate?
Yes, go on, mate.
Burning question that
Yeah.
I think everyone here would like to know. I think it's a very hot topic question. Do you know what I mean? So basically, curry goat and rice or lasagna?
What was it? What was the first one?
Curry goat and rice or lasagna?
Curry goat and rice or lasagna?
Yep.
Definitely curry goat every time, mate.
My G.
Yeah, literally one of my favourite. Either that or brown stew chicken is like one of my favourite foods, mate.
Yeah.
Getting me hungry.
How's COVID affected your career in the past sort of like 12 months, Ben?
Yeah, I mean a lot. Like going back to this time last year, I was literally like just in the process of getting ready to go on my debut New Zealand and Australia tour. So yeah, I think the whole COVID thing happened. I think it was about five days before I was supposed to fly out to New Zealand. So yeah, I basically found out that even if I did fly to New Zealand, I would have to self quarantine for 2 weeks, and in that case, I would have missed all the gigs anyway. So yeah, the first thing that happened with COVID was I had to pretty much cancel my New Zealand and Australia tour, which was obviously I was really looking forward to. Other than that, yeah, just obviously not traveling around and doing the gigs. I mean, I'm busy, like I'm working constantly. I feel like I'm almost busier now since COVID, but it's all like just busy being at home, really, just working like here in the studio or like my little office areas over here. So yeah, I pretty much just spend all my time either working on music or doing label admin bits in the studio. But yeah, I mean, obviously the gigs is the main thing. I think what I've had to replace the gigs with is obviously my Patreon page, or probably doing more sample packs and focusing on selling merchandise and things like that. So I feel like I've had to sort of take on X amount of other things that I probably wouldn't have had time to do if I was traveling around doing gigs, really.
And then have you found adapting to sort of the new climate of virtual sets and festivals difficult, or?
Yeah, I mean, the live streams were good. I enjoyed doing the live streams at first. I think after a while, obviously they got a little bit. There was a point last year, I think in the summer, where I was doing like 1-2 live streams a week. And it was good at first. I think what I really miss though is obviously I love DJing and I love playing music to people, and I'll always love doing that. But I really enjoyed just the whole traveling around, and not just traveling around going to raves, but I just enjoyed the whole process of just like getting on a train, getting on a plane or a bus, and traveling somewhere and staying in a hotel and going playing a set and chatting to people and then traveling home the next day. So I think, yeah, as much as I do miss DJing, I just really miss everything else about it as well, just like the whole traveling around aspect.
I got another question.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
Sorry, did I interrupt someone?
No, I was just saying, go on, mate.
Oh yeah. I don't know what your stance is with the underground scene, but do you think that a lot of the scene is going to go back underground at some point with so many people struggling for money, like clubs and that, or not?
Do you mean underground as in like illegal raves underground?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, yeah. I mean, if you suppress people enough, like they will find other methods of doing things. I think. I mean, I hope that obviously after all this is over, that obviously there'll still be a good scene here, and obviously hopefully too many clubs haven't gone under by that point. But yeah, I do think it probably will put us in a situation where inevitably we will see an increase in the underground scene or illegal raves, whether that be like at the moment while we're in lockdown, or even when the whole COVID thing finishes, when it finishes, like I say, especially in this country, if there's not as many clubs, if there's only half the amount of clubs open, but there's like more people than ever that want to go to raves, I suppose the only way is to go underground then, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know, we'll just have to see. Like,
yeah, thank you.
I've got a question.
I got go on.
We all got
actually,
questions.
I see Jumanji's unmuted. I was going to ask your question, Jumanji, but I'll let you ask it.
So, to new up and coming producers, do you reckon they should, like, with the whole argument of what audio stations they're using, do you reckon they should just use what they feel comfortable with, what works best for them, like, or get whatever everyone else is telling them to get?
No, I mean, definitely use what you're most comfortable with, because the thing is, I remember when I first started, I feel like, going back, I mean, when I was 19, so like 15 years ago, basically, I did an introduction to Cubase course, and it was like an evening course, like I used to go there once a week. And I remember back then, it was all like everyone either seemed to use Cubase or Reason, and there was always like arguments with people about which was better, like Cubase or Reason or whatever. And now I notice obviously people are more like on Ableton or Studio One or FL or whatever. But honestly, I really don't think it matters. If you're more comfortable with one program than another, then you should stick to that. I mean, definitely don't try and use something you're not comfortable with just because other people use it. Because I think it's just each to their own and all that, isn't it? I know people that have used Cubase for 10 years, and then they've switched to Ableton, and they love Ableton, and they now that's what they want to use. Like me personally, I kind of stick to what I know. I've used Cubase for 15 years now, so I stick to that. But I think if I was, like I said, that was probably more what people used when I started. But I think if I was probably starting out today, then maybe I would opt for something like Ableton or Studio One. So yeah, definitely just use what you're most comfortable with.
In regards to your labels, did you from the start? Did you always were they always paid releases, or did you ever do anything for free?
Yeah, I mean, when the very first label I started, it was all vinyl releases. So yeah, it was all very much paid. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we didn't necessarily make any money off it. I mean, we basically paid loads of money, got loads of vinyls pressed, and then probably didn't sell half of them. So yeah, it was. I think that I notice a lot of people now, like newer labels or people use the phrase like, oh, is it a paid release or is it a free download? But I feel like the kind of the whole free download label thing to me has only really been a thing in the last few years. I think I think it's or even like I say, the labels that have been running. I mean, I know obviously when I was running my labels years ago, I didn't really used to make very much money off them anyway because I was only just starting out. So it probably took me I don't know a good 5-6 years before I even started making a bit of money back. Really, at first it was just all putting money into it and not really making any money back.
Right. How obviously I know you said you've gone that way, but as a label owner, how would you feel? Like, how would you decide, like, when to actually start? Say, if I've been doing free downloads, how would I decide when to start? Like, when do I know it's going to be the right time to start doing paid releases?
I think the good thing about the free download labels, or like say just doing free downloads yourself, is on obviously on SoundCloud. You know, you've got that what is it called, Hyped It or something like that. So I mean, I've used that for years. I've found that, you know, that really helps obviously increase your following on SoundCloud and stuff like that. I suppose it kind of goes back to one of the previous questions that were asked. You know, it's much better, you know, for me as a label owner, if an artist already has a good following and they already have a good social media presence, you know, it's probably going to be a lot more effective when we release their EP if they've already got however many thousand followers on SoundCloud rather than, you know, a few hundred or whatever. So I think, you know, what I would probably say is build as much of a name for yourself as you can on the free downloads, because you're going to get 10 times the amount of attention with free downloads than you're going to get with paid releases. You know,
Exactly.
the reality is with paid releases, the majority of it now is streaming, you know, so you know, even with paid releases, you know, even if people like the tunes, they don't necessarily always buy them, you know, and you know, obviously you've got the illegal downloads and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, I just think build your name as much as you can with free downloads, and you know, because when I first started, I wasn't trying to necessarily make money, you know, I was just trying to get my name out there, you know, and it's a lot easier to get your name out there with free downloads versus paid releases, you know.
Cheers, mate.
I've got another question. I thought Jumanji was going to ask it before, but I'll ask it and sort of elaborate on it, because I noticed that you put up a status talking about, you know, having you set up for so long and not needing to, well, not upgrading or anything like that. You're going to start upgrading it now. So I guess you would kind of agree with this question, but do you feel like the limitations can spark creativity? Like, I agree with it because I'm sat with more or less the same setup. I've just got a MIDI keyboard, my computer, good speakers, good interface, and that's kind of been it. And I've kind of gone through buying stuff and then ending up selling it. But yeah, would you agree with that as well, or like speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think one thing I sort of the mistake I made when I very first started producing is I was obviously very enthusiastic about learning, but I think I got so caught up in, you know, the whole looking for new plugins and you know, what the latest plugins and VSTs were and which artist uses what VST and all that. I think I got so caught up in that I probably actually spent more time, you know, installing and downloading plugins than I did actually making music. So I think, you know, and a good few people have said this to me in the past as well. You know, it's definitely better to have, you know, limit yourself to what you know, and yeah, I think you'd definitely be more productive, because, you know, the more things you have, the more things you have to learn, really. And that doesn't mean to say, obviously, like, everyone should. It's good to learn new things, but, you know, I think there's learning new things, and then there's obviously like you say, like workflow and creativity and stuff like that. And, you know, sometimes they're like two completely separate things, you know.
Nice one.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So when you're like testing the mix of your song, do you typically use headphones or monitor speakers? And are there audio outputs, hardware that you use as well to test your mix to make it sound like as perfect as possible?
Yeah. Well, obviously I use these Adams monitors that you can see in the background. I've had them for like just over a year now, and they're like, you know, definitely the best monitors I've had. I use headphones as well. I've got these. I'll just show you. I've got these KRK studio monitoring headphones that I use, and I've also got these Bear Dynamic headphones as well. So I tend to just try not to rely on either of them too much, and just try and get a good happy medium between all of them, really. And then I've got my DJ setup is like out there, and I've got some like KRKs with that. So obviously I'll test them out there in the mix and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the best thing you can do is just test it on as many speakers as you can, and just send it to a few people with other types of monitors that you trust their judgment, and and get their feedback as much as you can as well.
That's nice. Are your monitors like flat frequency, or are they like biased in any like medium on the music spectrum?
Sorry, how do you mean?
So like, so my headphones are like flat frequency, which means that it's like there's no boosting in the bass or the mids or the highs. I was just wondering if you use the same sort of thing, or do you?
Oh yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would always have it set like that. I wouldn't want to have any boosts anywhere that's going to kind of, I think the aim when you're producing music is you just want a true sound, because if you need to know exactly what's going on. I think a while ago, like I remember seen a lot of people producing with like Beats by Dre like headphones and stuff like that. And I never really understood that, because if you look at the specs of them, they've got like a huge bass boost on them. And I was just thought, surely if you use that to produce, then you kind of like you're throwing yourself off the scent of your own tunes, basically. So yeah, definitely always, just like say, don't have the boost on, and just have it, as it comes, like flat frequency.
Great, thank you very much.
All right.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
Have you tried the new Synth Vital yet?
No, actually. So I'm just in the process of this. This is the setup that I've had for 10 years, and literally in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to have a totally new setup. And I'm going to have. So I've actually got Windows XP at the moment, and Cubase 5. So I'm like running a really outdated system. But in 2 weeks' time, when I've got my new computer set up, and I've got like Cubase 10.5 and Windows 10, all the latest stuff, I'm definitely going to have a go with it, because I've heard that it's really good.
Do you use any analog synthesizers or hardware to make your music, or is it all done by like VSTs?
Yeah, I mean, I've always used VSTs and software. I feel like I've always been more of a computer-based person anyway. Like when I was younger, I did graphic design at college. When I was even younger than that, I used to make computer games on my PC. So I feel like, again, it comes to like what you're comfortable with. I think I've always been more of like been quite comfortable using computers. So I've always used software. I mean, there's like a little compressor here that I use, which is, connected through FireWire to that. But I've never really had any analog synths or anything like that, But on the other hand, I've got, good friends who they like to be a lot more hands-on, and they do have a lot more analog studios and stuff. But for me, I've always been quite comfortable just with, in the box, like software.
Cool. Has anyone else got any more questions?
I have one more question.
Go on. I've seen it.
Oh, no, you can go first.
You go first.
Oh, thank you. What is like your go-to digital plugin? What would you say your favorite plugin is to use in your DAW?
I think it depends what I'm working on, really. But I mean, there's definitely like a few now that I'm sort of looking to move my studio and upgrade. There's definitely like plugins which I've used, pretty much for like 10 years plus, which I'm finding out now that they don't have like 64-bit versions of them that I can use on my new setup. There's one analyzer, like a Spectrum analyzer, that was called it's a really old one. It's called like Inspector XL analyzer. And I remember watching a video of like Chase and Status using this analyzer on their tracks, about 11 or 12 years ago. and I managed to get a copy of it, you know, and I've been using that on every single tune and mastering everything for over 10 years now. And I know it's only an analyzer, but for me, that's like one of my favourite things to use. But I think apart from that, I'm just, you know, there's a few things like I'm a big fan of like the Waves plugins, like the API EQ I use on a lot of things, and then also the Brainworks plugins I really like as well. Like I use the BX Control and the BX Hybrid 2.0, funnily enough.
That's nice. Thank you.
That's all right.
I've just seen a question just in the main chat thing from Biggie Cruz, and he's asking what makes a good event to play at and what equally makes a bad event to play at.
I mean, it definitely helps when there's a good enthusiastic crowd. You know, just when obviously when you pick up on everyone else's vibe and everyone's enthusiastic and there's a nice positive vibe, that definitely helps. I think, you know, it helps as well when the promoters look after you. You know, there's definitely a few instances I've had in the past where, you know, the promoters don't really look after you and it doesn't really make the night as enjoyable for you, you know, because you, like I say, they don't sort of give you, they don't really look after you with drinks or a nice hotel, or, you know, I've stayed in some pretty dire situations before. So yeah, good enthusiastic crowd and just a promoter that's professional and looks after you and respects you, really.
What would you say your best set or venue that you've played?
I think probably one of my favourite sets, or my like memories of me playing a good set.
En veldig god DJ som gir ut sånn gratis QA. Og så var en veldig god DJ venn av meg, så men det er ikke en veldig god DJ.
But yeah, so one of the good memories I've got of like a good set that I played was probably the first time I played at a Let It Roll festival. I think I played there. I think it was like 2016 or whatever. But my flight was actually delayed. So I actually landed at Prague airport like an hour before I was supposed to be on the decks, and it was like really, really stressful. Like driving, you know, getting in a taxi, trying to get to this festival with an hour to spare, then getting to the festival and all of the people wearing like high-vis vests and that. I was going and asking them where to go because I didn't know where I was playing, and none of them could understand me. The only thing I knew was that I was on after Nicky Black Market, so I basically just ran around the festival trying to hear some Jump Up or something, trying to find out where Nicky Black Market was. And then I finally heard it and found him, and literally got there with 5 minutes to spare. And the whole thing had been really stressful, and I was knackered. But the promoters were really good, and there was a few people that I knew there, and I honestly think I played like probably one of the best sets that I've played, you know. And I remember that the day after, there was, I think someone had like tagged me on like Twitter or something like that, saying like, it was mad seeing DJ Hybrid on 4 decks at Let It Roll last night. But I was only ever on 2 decks the whole night. But I was mixing on 4 decks, so it must have been pretty good, you know.
I bet that was a mission then.
Yeah, it was a close one.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got any more questions?
I've got one more question. When is Mrs. Magoo going to start making tracks?
When's she going to start making tunes?
Yeah.
Well,
that's mainly aimed at Magoo.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, actually, we made a tune. She came down here, like to my studio here a while ago, and we actually started working on the tune. And it's pretty much finished, and her first tune's actually a collab with me, and it's actually coming out on Deep in the Jungle in about 2 or 3 months' time.
That's good. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So I think that will bring this to an end, unless anyone's got any final questions. Sweet. I hope everyone enjoyed this. It was our first time doing it. I hope it went okay for everyone, and hopefully everyone got some information that they wanted to hear out of it. And thanks, Hybrid, for coming down and giving us an hour of your time.
All good.
Appreciate it. Wicked. So yeah, cheers everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Nice, Robbie.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all good, man.
Awesome interview, man. Big up.
Thanks.
Big up, big up.